Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. As the Modi government approaches its first anniversary in just over a week's time, how do senior members of the former Congress-led government view its performance? That's the key question I shall put today to former HRD Law and Communication Minister Kapil Sibal. But first, the unedifying public quarrel between the Delhi Chief Minister and the Lieutenant Governor over the appointment of a new acting Chief Secretary. It's only a temporary 10-day appointment, but the issue seems to have spiraled out of control. If it wasn't a serious matter, it could actually be the stuff of comic opera. Later, I shall talk to former Cabinet Secretary T.S.R. Subramaniam and former Chief Secretary of Delhi, Shailaja Chandra. But first, I'm joined by the lady who served for 15 years as Chief Minister of Delhi, the highly regarded and much loved Sheila Dikshit. Mrs. Dikshit, let me start with a simple question of principle. Does a Chief Minister have a right to decide who is the acting Chief Secretary, or in the case of Delhi, because it's a union territory and not a full-fledged state, does the Lieutenant Governor have a critical say in the appointment?
You're asking me, Karan?
Yes, Mrs. Dikshit, I am asking you.
Yeah. Now you see, all appointments, including that of the Chief Secretary and also the acting Chief Secretary if the need arises, is done together. The file is sending recommendations by the Chief Minister to the Lieutenant Governor, and he agrees to whatever are the names that are given. Now, in this case, I feel that an unnecessary controversy has come up for a position which is to last just about 8 or 10 days.
That I understand, but what I want to ask you is a specific question. Does the Chief Minister have the right to decide who should be acting Chief Secretary, or because this is a union territory and not a full-fledged state, does the Governor have the final decision? Which of the two is the final deciding authority?
Well, it's difficult to say, because when I was there for 15 years, we took decisions together. We consulted each other, and if there was any difference of an opinion, it was sorted out. But there is definitely this thing that it is the Chief Minister who has the right to recommend the names, and the final authority of the Lieutenant Governor to decide who will be the Chief Secretary.
In other words, it's a somewhat indeterminate situation. In your time, the matter was always resolved amicably, but where there is no amicable relationship between the two, then it is a messy situation as we are seeing today.
That's right. And I just want to tell you that this is not a political competition. It's something administrative. And please, both the Lieutenant Governor and the Chief Minister must not demoralize the bureaucracy.
Now, if you were Chief Minister and the Lieutenant Governor had not accepted your first choice for acting Chief Secretary and instead preferred to promote someone you thought was undeserving, how would you have handled such a situation?
I would go to the Lieutenant Governor and give him my point of view, and either he accepts my point of view or he convinces me that your point of view is flawed, so take my point of view. Now, it is such a small matter, just a temporary posting for about 10-15 days. It can easily be resolved. I don't see why it has to be brought into the public domain and everybody has to know about it, something which can be settled very amicably, as you said.
So you're also saying that in this instance, Arvind Kejriwal, instead of writing letters or leaking letters, should have gone across and met the governor, sat face to face and sorted it out. Have I understood correctly?
No. Yes, either you go across or talk on the telephone and say, I think this is it.
Would you therefore...
Now the
Carry on. Carry on.
Carry on. What I would say is that, you know, Gamblin, they brought out this thing about Gamblin, something in power, which they feel is not good. Well, then take the power department away from her. If you have any doubts about any officer, performance or otherwise, you take that department away. But when something has been done which ought to have been done properly, which has been done properly, the senior most has been picked up, I don't see what the controversy is about.
In fact, you raised this question about the letter of comfort that Shakuntala Gamlin wanted the Power Minister to give Reliance to help Reliance secure a loan of 11,000 crore. Given that the Delhi government is a 49% shareholder in all discoms, is such a letter
That's
of
right.
comfort justified, or is it unjustified?
Now, I would say if Gamlin had given such a letter, it's for the Power Minister to overrule that letter. Can give me reasons why you should do it. And if the Power Minister feels that he is not competent enough to do it and cannot do it, the Cabinet takes a decision.
In fact, in this instance, what's happened, Mrs. Dixit, is that Shakuntala Gamlin recommended to the Power Minister that such a letter of comfort be issued. He was reluctant and refused to do so. He then reported to the Chief Minister that he believed Shakuntala Gamlin was in fact advocating a course of action that would benefit the power discoms. In other words, she was acting on their behalf and therefore acting wrongly.
Well, if he has a reasonably truthful conclusion of this, then he has the right to say, all right, I have my doubts, please take her away from the power department, put somebody else. You can always do that. You can set up a committee, the Cabinet can take a decision. There are many ways. Unless you want to denigrate somebody, you appoint somebody, the Lieutenant Governor chooses the senior most because the other senior most has refused to take the Chief Minister, temporary Chief Secretaryship. Then I don't see why this battle is becoming a public affair and demoralizing both the bureaucracy, and the people of Delhi are wondering what is happening, who is right, who is wrong.
Can I ask you two pointed questions? First of all, would you agree that both the Chief Minister and the Governor have mishandled the situation?
Well, I think so. I think so. They have not been in touch as they should have been.
Do you get the feeling that the Governor perhaps precipitated matters because he refused to accept the Chief Minister's preference, and most people feel that the Chief Minister has a right to have a Chief Secretary of his choice? So is the Governor to blame for precipitating matters?
No, I would say that 4 names were sent, of which I believe 4 names were sent, and I believe the Governor picked on this name. Then the Governor could have spoken to him, or the Chief Minister could have spoken to the Governor that I have my doubts about this choice of yours. Let's think of somebody else. And that would have been amicably settled by both of them. I don't know who has triggered this, but it certainly is not a happy situation. It's disturbing the people of Delhi, and it is also certainly very, very disturbing for the bureaucracy.
One last question, Mrs. Dixit. Today, Arvind Kejriwal arranged for Anindo Majumdar, the Principal Secretary's Services, to be actually locked out of his office in the Delhi Secretariat because Mr. Majumdar had issued a letter appointing Shakuntala Gamlin as acting Chief Secretary. Now, is it proper for the Chief Minister to resort to such, how should I put it, petty action against a senior civil servant who at the end of the day was only doing his duty under specific instructions of the Governor?
Karanji, this is a government. It's not just a political party which has the freedom to say what you like with anybody. You go according to certain rules and regulations, and you need a bureaucracy which works for you, and it needs a comfort feeling, and that it is not going to be denigrated in any way, so that they can carry on the work that they are supposed to do. And very frankly speaking, it's the bureaucracy which carries on the work which the Cabinet or the elected government of the day asks them to do.
You're clearly saying to me, Mrs. Dixit, that the manner in which the Chief Minister has handled Anindo Majumdar was wrong and unbecoming.
Yes, I entirely agree. There was no need to do something like this.
Mrs. Dixit, thank you very much for speaking to me. Let me put to you first, Mr. Subramaniam, that critical question of principle that I put initially to Mrs. Dixit, because she seemed to suggest that there was no clear line between who has the right to choose the chief secretary? Is it, and I'm asking you this as a former cabinet secretary, is it the right of a chief minister to choose his chief secretary? Or because Delhi is a union territory, not a full-fledged state, does the governor have a critical role to play?
I suspect Sheilaji was a little diplomatic in discussing this. There are two ways of looking at it. She talked of the amicable way in which they sat down and discussed and settled it. Obviously, that happens very well. When the amicable way does not work, then the law comes in.
What is the law?
The rule, very obvious and very clear. The cadre controlling authority is the Government of India, Home Ministry, number one, not the Personnel Department, Home Ministry, because the cadre consists of 8 states, not just UP, not just Delhi. Delhi is not a full-fledged state, and the powers for postings and transfers of All India service officers has been delegated under the rules which is subordinate legislation
to whom?
To the LG. And therefore the legal, so ideal will be settlement through, which obviously
but
everywhere.
I'm interrupting you because I don't want to get lost in detail, but you're saying a very important thing. The ideal way, when there's a difference between the chief minister and governor, sorted out amicably. When the amicable route doesn't work, the actual authority at the end vests with the LG.
Indisputably in this case.
With
you
the
may
LG.
agree with it, you may agree with it, disagree with it, you may say elected government, all kinds of arguments. Today the law of the land is that.
Well, that's very clear. Mrs. Chandra, let me ask you as a former chief secretary another question. The governor claims that 2, Mrs. Dixit says in fact 4 names were sent to him, but the governor I think said 2, and that he chose Mrs. Gamblin because she was the senior of the 2. Now, if the chief minister actually wanted Parimal Rai rather than Shakuntala Gamlin, why did he recommend 2 names? Or is he required to recommend more than one so that the governor has a choice?
You know, Karan, these things are not as cut and dry as you are making it sound. I would go along with Mrs. Dixit. Exactly the position that she put is what happened during my tenure and after that. Normally, the chief secretary would be seeking the orders of the chief minister and would move the file to LG, and usually it is done by just talking to the LG. If, however, the LG has reservations, he'll convey them to the chief minister. They will meet, they will sort it out. This is too small a matter to be splitting hairs and making it seem as though your powers have been taken away.
Can I
KK
interrupt?
Sharma was
Can I interrupt?
No, let me finish.
Mrs. Chandra, I want to interrupt for one critical reason. Are you disagreeing with what Mr. Subramaniam said a moment ago? And I'll repeat what he said in case you didn't hear
not,
him.
Not in the least.
So the power to decide vests with the lieutenant governor. Is that right?
What he said was absolutely correct. As long as you can do it amicably, that is the way. Otherwise, the rule of law has to be followed. And that rule very clearly vests the services authority with the lieutenant governor. If he had certain reasons for doing it, it is for him to explain those reasons on file and in his conduct with the officers. But for a 10-day period, if somebody was considered unsuitable, the first thing should have been to discuss it over the telephone or face to face. This is most unfortunate, and I agree with Mr. Subramaniam, I agree with Mrs. Dixit, and there is really no dissension between what the 2 of them have said.
Okay.
And I think that it must be borne in mind. One thing you didn't let me complete. Mr. KK Sharma was the choice of the chief minister. He could not get the first one because that man had not reached the level of seniority. From Goa, Mr. KK Sharma was imported into Delhi almost overnight because he wanted a particular person. I think more than enough has been done. For 10 days, you give the job to anyone. It hardly matters.
That's a very interesting point that Mrs. Chandra is making, that when it was the question of choosing the substantive chief secretary, Mr. KK Sharma, as she says, was imported from Goa overnight, and Arvind Kejriwal got his choice. In other words, the governor went to a particular extent to help him. Now when it's a question of appointing an acting chief secretary
don't
for 10
use
days...
the word appointing. This is giving a temporary charge, not appointment. An appointment
so
comes...
is Arvind making too much of an issue?
Absolutely. An appointment comes when there's a vacancy is over 45 days.
That I understand. So come back to
therefore,
this. Is Arvind making too much of an issue?
Wait a minute. Assume that what Arvind wanted happened. Do you want a senior officer Gamblin in that system to work under a junior officer, whatever his name is, for those 10 days? Is that correct? Is that valid? What wrong has she done there? Unlike in politics, there is a very clear hierarchical system.
But you're saying
if a person
something
is superseded, I'm saying something else.
Yeah, you're saying something very important. You're saying in addition to the fact that the power to appoint vests with the LG, Arvind wanted to appoint a junior person above a senior person.
The normal,
which was wrong.
natural thing, always, a 60, 70-year-old is, unless a person is consciously superseded. So if they wanted to supersede this lady, they would have to suspend her or get her out of the system and then got the next man in.
Mrs. Chandra, let me put something else to you. Arvind Kejriwal hasn't simply politicized this matter. He's additionally taken to personally attacking Mrs. Gamblin at a public rally yesterday. He said he would personally vet every single file she clears as acting chief secretary. Is it becoming of a chief minister to bring a senior civil servant into public disrepute in this way?
It is absolutely unacceptable and wrong. The cadre officers are very worked up about it. The retired officers and serving officers want to have a press conference and talk about it, because this kind of demoralization has never ever taken place in the annals of the UT cadre, and for that matter any state cadre. You hear of one person or two, but this is going too far, locking up rooms and behaving in this manner. The real point is that I think he has felt that he is being slighted, and he has the powers and they are being taken away from him surreptitiously. I wish somebody would give him the legal position and he would consult the constitutional experts or persuade the Ministry of Home Affairs to change the rules, or find a way of trying to get more delegation of authority. But as long as the rule is written, he has to follow it.
Let's come very quickly to the situation that's arisen today with regard to Rajinder Kumar. Arvind Kejriwal tried to appoint him Special Secretary Services. After Anindo Motumdar was moved out, the governor declared that null and void. First question, does the governor have the power to declare it null and void?
He is the authority. Under the law, there is no question about it. I share Shailaja's indignation. I hope it will be echoed. Give me just half a minute to expand this point now. The civil servant, under his code of conduct, conduct rules, is unable to speak in public. Suppose this lady is talking about three-faced Arvind. He tells a lie in the morning, tells lie somebody else. He plays one politician against the other. He's close to so-and-so people. This crook is his buddy. Suppose. I'm not saying this is true. Now suppose chief secretaries and secretaries all over India, you will have bedlam here. The civil servant, even in parliament, is not talked of unless he is not even suspended, unless there's a charge sheet which has been proven. And now, therefore...
So raising her name in a public rally and talking about Mrs. Gamblin in this way was extremely unbecoming.
Not extremely, it is unforgivable. It is a huge sin. Somebody should condemn it in strong terms and say, don't do this childishness again, you're going to ruin the system.
What about the reply allegedly that Manish Sisodia, as Deputy Chief Minister, Mrs. Chandra, sent to the governor? He has apparently said to the governor that the governor's order that the appointment of Rajinder Kumar is null and void is unconstitutional and it will not be complied with. Was the Deputy Chief Minister right to respond in this way? And if he wasn't, does it then amount to a constitutional impropriety and worse, defiance of an authority on his part?
No. I think we are using words like constitution a bit too much. This is a purely administrative matter. And in case his own principal secretary, who has the ear of the chief ministers, whose responsibility it is to execute and see that the chief minister's wishes and wants are carried out, if such a person is directly put in charge of the services department, the message is loud and clear that I will use my minion to get my work done. That is not how the system works, and if the Lieutenant Governor said it is null and void on this occasion, I would have done exactly the same thing. Not that I'm the LG, but I'm just saying that that is the correct stand to take.
In other words, in a nutshell, Arvind Kejriwal has behaved improperly. The law is not on his side. The rules are not on his side.
I believe so. Clearly, there must be other reasons.
But we don't know what they are.
I don't know what they are.
But this is a very unbecoming precedent.
It is very sad because we are now playing with the system.
Which is the worst thing we should do.
It's the worst thing.
So at the end of the day, Arvind Kejriwal, therefore, in your estimation, owes the people of Delhi an apology.
And to her personally.
Her being Mrs. Gamblin.
To that officer.
Yes.
To that officer, because he has brought her in disrepute. She deserves now an unqualified apology.
You agree that he owes Mrs. Gamblin an apology, Mr. Chandra, very quickly, in 10 seconds?
I completely agree. She has her own reputation to keep. Her name cannot be sullied before the public in this manner. She's an officer of the All India Services, and she is protected by the All India Services Act.
We've run right out of time. I apologize to stop you there. We've run right out of time. My thanks to both of you for joining me. My thanks also to Mr. Dixit for joining me earlier.